Cops threw a handcuffed black woman from a helicopter. Then they found out armed officers don't need parachutes to bring hell. Sirens cry through the sky. The blades cut the storm. What seemed like a normal arrest becomes a nightmare nobody will forget. She's falling, betrayed, cuffed, and helpless. Yet in that single heartbeat before hitting the ground, the world's about to learn who she really is. This isn't just falling. It's fury, courage, and payback rising up. Subscribe now because what comes next will blow your mind. Rain pounded the metal shell like gunshots as the transport chopper ripped through the midnight storm. A steel beast fighting above the ocean. Captain Maya Reeves, once the most decorated combat pilot in her unit, now sat tied at the knees and wrists, her uniform soaked, her mind playing the betrayal over and over. The men around her, agents she'd flown with, laughed with, trusted with her life, wouldn't look at her. They were ghosts now, hollow with guilt and orders they didn't get. Lightning bled through the clouds, turning their faces white for a second before throwing everything back into darkness. A mission gone bad, they said. A report made up, signatures faked, evidence erased. Maya had learned too much. Names of officers selling military flight plans to private warlords. The trail that went straight to the man sitting across from her now. She wanted to scream, to tear through the storm with her voice, but she saved her breath. Every beat of her heart was thinking ahead. The door latch crashed open, letting the sky explode into the cabin. A roar of wind and rain so wild it drowned the sound of their fear. "You were never supposed to see this much, Captain," said the commander, pushing her toward the edge. She stared at him without blinking, remembering the faces of soldiers she'd pulled from burning wrecks. The promises she'd made to protect them all, even these cowards who were about to kill her. The horizon tilted, the ocean flashing silver below. They pushed, gravity grabbed her. For one endless second, she was weightless, framed in lightning, her reflection twisting in 1,000 raindrops. Panic should have taken her, but instead she felt clarity, the kind that comes when everything you were is stripped away. She tucked her legs, fought against the cuffs, threw her shoulder down to catch the wind, just enough to change her falling angle. The rain stung like bullets. The air tore at her lungs, and yet a fierce calm grew inside her chest. She had trained in free-fall simulations, but this was raw survival. The helicopter became a shrinking shadow above, its red light pulsing like a heartbeat fading into distance. They thought she was gone. They thought the ocean would swallow the truth along with her. But Maya Reeves had no plan of dying unknown. Under the storm, she saw the faint glow of a fishing boat's lights, turned her body with a soldier's precision, and hit the water like a blade. Pain exploded through her ribs. Darkness swarmed, but her mind held to one promise. She would rise again. The waves closed over her. The storm ate her whole. And in that darkness, a single thought burned. I'm coming back. The sea was an iron lung that tried to keep her forever. Each wave folding over Maya Reeves like a living wall, crushing the breath from her chest as the storm raged above. She drifted between darkness and memory, flashes of cockpit lights, orders yelled through static, the sound of her father's voice saying, "Never give up altitude or hope." She clawed toward that sound until her hands hit metal. The hull of a loose cargo crate thrown by the storm. Her wrists still bound, she hooked the cuffs around a jagged edge and used the push of the waves to snap one link free. The steel tearing skin but giving her back her hands. Pain was nothing new. Pain was proof she was still alive. Hours blurred into a gray dawn. The storm thinned to mist, and she saw a coastline etched with cliffs, black rock dripping with morning light. She swam with what strength remained, pulling herself onto a narrow shelf of stone where she collapsed, coughing up salt and blood, the world spinning in shades of blue. The helicopter was gone, but its echo haunted the wind. Somewhere out there, the men who betrayed her would already be writing the report. Mission failure, body not recovered, case closed. She smiled, cracked and bitter, because they were right about one thing. Her body wasn't recovered. It had come back to life. By the time the sun burned through the fog, she was moving again, limping along the cliffs until she found a fishing shack left to rust. Inside, she scavenged a knife, a coil of wire, a flare gun missing flares, and a torn first aid kit. She stitched her wounds with shaking hands, whispering names. The squad mates lost to the corruption she'd uncovered. The civilians her commanders had written off as acceptable losses. Every name was fuel. She built a small fire and dried her uniform, then pried open the shack's radio. Static hiss, then a faint voice. A supply ship reporting engine trouble somewhere north of her position. Perfect. She rigged a makeshift signal using a mirror and the flare gun's cracked lens to flash Morse across the bay. When the ship came within sight that evening, she signaled once, twice, then hid behind the rocks until a lifeboat launched to check. 2 deckhands jumped out, careful, unarmed, good men by the look of their weather-beaten faces. She waited until one turned his back before stepping into view. Dripping, silent, eyes hard enough to freeze them mid-breath. "Help me reach the mainland," she said simply, and something in her tone made them obey without question. That night she sat below deck wrapped in a tarp, watching the coastline shrink while planning every move of her return. She would need allies, people outside the chain of command, those who'd seen too much and lived. Her mind mapped routes: an airfield in Malta, a contact in Berlin, an encrypted drive hidden in a locker under her old call sign. She didn't just want revenge, she wanted exposure. The truth would burn brighter than any bullet. As the ship cut through calmer waters, she closed her eyes for the first time in days. But sleep brought no rest. Only the hum of rotor blades, the smell of rain, and the vow that no one who had touched that betrayal would sleep peacefully again. When she opened her eyes, dawn was breaking, gold over endless blue, and she whispered to the horizon, "They think they buried a ghost. I'm the storm that follows." The ship docked under a sky the color of burnt steel, and by the time the crew finished unloading their crates, Maya Reeves was already gone, melting into the sprawl of the harbor city like smoke. She moved through alleys that stank of diesel and rain, her borrowed coat hiding the torn uniform beneath, her mind working through every variable like a pilot reading wind currents. Each breath was a calculation. She needed proof, allies, and a weapon that could outfly the reach of the men who had written her death certificate. She found a payphone that still worked and used a stolen ID to ping a secure line she hadn't called in years. A familiar voice answered, low, tired, and threaded with shock when she whispered her name. "Maya, they said you were dead. I know. I need you to act like that's still true." Silence. Then a slow, careful exhale, her contact. Lieutenant Annika Joe had once served beside her in covert logistics, the kind of officer who remembered everything and trusted nothing. Within hours, Annika arranged transport to an underground airstrip outside Lisbon, where a decommissioned surveillance drone waited in a hangar under a false registry. Maya spent the flight hunched in the cargo bay, reassembling a small transmitter from scavenged parts, fingers moving on instinct, even as exhaustion dragged at her bones. The city lights below looked like constellations of the life she'd lost. Normal people with ordinary fears, unaware that entire wars could hinge on what names vanished in a file. When they landed, Annika met her with a flask of coffee and a stare that held both awe and worry. "You could disappear," she said softly. "Start over." Maya shook her head. "I'm not built to vanish." They loaded the drone's databanks, mapping every encrypted transfer tied to the officers who had sold her out. What emerged on the screen made Annika curse aloud. Bank trails leading to defense contractors, and those to senior command. The rot went higher than either had imagined. By dawn, Maya had a plan: infiltrate the upcoming security summit in Geneva, where the conspirators would be meeting under diplomatic cover. She would walk among them unseen, record every word, and broadcast it live to the press before anyone could silence her again. They spent 2 days forging credentials and rebuilding her strength. The first time Maya looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Short-cropped hair, forged ID tags, the steady eyes of a woman reborn in fire. On the third night, she stood on the runway beside the drone, wind tearing at her jacket, watching the horizon flare with the first light of morning. "You sure you're ready?" Annika asked. Maya smiled, small and lethal. "Ready" ended when they threw me out of that sky. She climbed aboard a chartered jet, under a false manifest, disappearing once more into the clouds that had tried to kill her. Somewhere far below, her enemies laughed in offices filled with smoke and power, believing the story of her death had been written. They didn't know the author was coming back to edit it with blood and truth. The jet sliced through clouds the color of ash, descending toward a world that believed Maya Reeves was a ghost. Below her, Geneva shimmered like a promise and a trap. She moved through the airport with the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose, her forged credentials tucked inside a diplomatic badge that carried the false name Helena Cade. Every step echoed with the hum of the mission she had built from nothing. Expose the corruption that had consumed her command, and make the world hear the truth before the powerful could bury it again. The Summit's hotel rose from the lakeside like a fortress of glass filled with guards, politicians and contractors wearing polished smiles that hid 1,000 betrayals. Maya studied them through mirrored elevators, her reflection fragmenting with each floor she passed. When the doors opened to the conference level, she was already wearing an earpiece linked to the drone Annika had launched at dawn. Its tiny cameras fed her a live view of the city's sky, a web of movement that turned her solitude into strategy. Inside the grand hall, chandeliers glowed like captured suns, and the air smelled of money and false alliances. The men who had ordered her death were here. General Corson, Director Vale, Colonel Hughes, all laughing beneath a mural of world peace while signing contracts that traded lives for profit. Maya's pulse slowed, her mind crystal clear. She moved to the media station she had hacked into that morning, inserted a drive disguised as a translator's chip, and whispered a single command. Transmit. Across the hall, projectors flickered. The feed from Annika's drone replaced the Summit logo on every screen. Bank records, audio of secret meetings, flight manifests linking their personal accounts to illegal weapon shipments. Voices rose, confusion spreading like fire. Corson's eyes snapped toward Maya, recognition dawning too late. She stood there without disguise now, badge cast aside, her gaze ablaze. "You wanted me silent," she said, her voice carrying over the microphones the way thunder carries over mountains. "You buried soldiers, civilians, and truth to build your empire. Consider this your storm." Guards rushed forward, but the crowd surged first. Reporters, delegates, aides, phones recording, broadcasting live before security could cut the feed. Vale lunged for the console, yanking cables, but the drone above had already mirrored the signal to global networks. Around the world, headlines bloomed like explosions. Military fraud exposed, hero officer alive. Panic cracked the Summit open. Maya ducked beneath a table as gunfire erupted from a mercenary disguised as security. Glass shattered, alarms screamed. She moved with the precision of training long buried yet never forgotten, rolling, disarming, striking, a blur of muscle and will. When the smoke cleared, Corson stood alone near the balcony, weapon trembling in his hand. "You don't understand, Reeves," he hissed. "We were protecting national interests." She took a step closer, eyes locked on his. "You were protecting your bank account." The drone's spotlight cut through the broken ceiling, bathing them both in white fire as helicopters of real law enforcement roared in from the lake. For the first time, Corson looked small. He lowered the gun, but pride kept him from surrendering. Maya reached out, gripping his wrist, forcing the weapon away, then handed it to the arriving officers. "The law will finish what conscience couldn't," she said. As they dragged him off, flashbulbs flared and she turned toward the shattered glass that opened to the lake. Rain began to fall again, gentle this time, washing dust and blood from her hands. Anika's voice crackled in her earpiece. "It's done. You're alive everywhere. The world knows." Maya exhaled, her shoulders sagging under the weight finally lifting. "Then maybe they'll believe in justice again," she whispered. The storm outside had broken into sunlight filtering through steam, the city gleaming like something reborn. She walked through the chaos unchallenged, past the cameras, past the men shouting her name until she reached the open air. The lake spread before her, calm and endless. She knelt at the edge, dipped her hand into the water, and felt its cold clarity ripple through her veins. For the first time since the fall, she wasn't running, fighting, or surviving. She was living. Somewhere behind her, the sirens faded into applause or maybe memory. She looked up at the sky that had once tried to kill her and smiled. Small but real. "They thought they'd thrown me out of the world," she thought. "But all they did was give me the sky back." And with that, Maya Reeves, pilot, survivor, soldier of truth, stood, shoulders squared to the wind, and walked into the bright horizon that had waited for her since the night she fell.